Hello and welcome to Journeys and Journals. We get to pioneer, meet the pioneers, and travel back through history. We've got guests today who know the whole story about not just coming west, but way out west. Won't you meet?
Dorothy Tulare.
Kathy Smith.
Dorothy and Catherine are sisters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes.
And little sister is an artist, and
Yes.
she has drawn pictures of this trip too.
Well, I don't know.
Well, you've got stories to tell.
Oh, yes.
How did your family get west? Out west was a pioneer's country.
Well, I think they liked adventure, for one
Okay.
thing. Mm-hmm.
Now, who was the adventure one here?
Well,
We're going to start with the Zoom waltz. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
John Wilhelm Andreas Zumwalt, called Andrew, was born in 1698
Oh my.
in Alsace, Lorraine,
Lorraine.
France, or Germany, whichever it belonged to at the time.
Right. Who was the winner that week?
yes.
Yes. And he came to America in 1737. And he brought his wife, Mary, and 3 daughters with him.
Oh, what adventure.
Yes, and he purchased a farm and built a cabin in Pennsylvania, near where Little York now
Now,
is.
he obviously didn't stay too long in Pennsylvania because
Oh.
we're out west.
Well, true, and then he and his wife Mary had 3 more children,
Ooh.
and he lost his first wife, married again, and his second wife Annie had 5 more children.
Oh my, I'm counting 3 and 3 and 5. That makes 11.
Yes, and the last family was all sons.
Now, are your descendants from which one of these 11?
2 of them.
Oh, well, okay. Keep talking.
Okay.
You'll get me all mixed up here.
Right, that's why it's on paper. So Andrew developed cancer, and they moved to Virginia. They thought they'd be nearer doctors there. But he lost his fight in 1764.
Oh, before the country was a country.
Yes. And his children would have inherited a very nice piece of land in Pennsylvania, but what the story goes that one of the daughters had just made a new bonnet, and she needed something to stiffen the brim, and she couldn't read. Girls didn't read.
Oh dear.
So she looked around, she found this document, and she used it. And so when they went looking for it, they couldn't find it, and it wasn't recorded, so they lost their
She didn't remember the sunbonnet with the, oh my
Well, she
goodness.
didn't know what it was
Oh,
because she couldn't read.
Yeah.
girls need to have education, don't they?
Yes. And then, after their father's death, all 7 of the boys lived in Virginia, and 4 of them were in the Revolutionary War. They documented.
So you're a DAR?
No,
Not officially.
No, not officially.
But we both could be daughters of the American Revolution,
Yeah.
all 3 of us.
Several different ways.
Yes.
Yes.
And then, so after the war, there was a big migration started west, and they went to Kentucky. And they lived there for a while, and then in 1796, between 1796 and 1806, 6 of the sons took off for Missouri territory.
I had some family down there too. I wonder if we were north or south of the Mason-Dixon line.
They were north of the Missouri River in St. Charles district.
Well, maybe they didn't know one another with my family.
Maybe
We're
not.
from Kabul, Missouri.
And Jacob built the first log cabin. And then during the years, and during the War of 1812, it was used for a fort, Fort Zumwalt. And there's still remnants of that fort. That's some of the pictures we have. This is the fort.
Well, this is the fort, and that was home, a log. Nice.
Yes.
They maybe added on that extra room.
And there was also a wing out the back. And this chimney was the double chimney between the two big rooms.
And that's all it's
And
left
that's
of it.
all that's left. Didn't I see a picture with that would be this fireplace?
Yes, the one in the middle.
Okay. Now, these people, do you have a picture of these people?
Not those. We have a picture of the area with all of the Zumwalts and all of the Crows and Andrew Jackson. Daniel Boone there.
When you say Crows, you're talking local history, aren't you?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Because there's Crow Road we know
Oh,
about.
yes.
There's lots of crows.
And we're related to most of them.
Okay. Now you have a little more on your story there.
Yes, I have. So, and Fort Zumwalt became a park, and it still is a state park of Missouri. Christina Zumwalt, this is Christina
Oh my.
and Andrew Jackson.
Doesn't she look serious? But they had to sit really still.
Yes, she married Andrew Jackson Crow, and Christina is the daughter of Jacob Zumwalt that built the fort.
And what a gorgeous dress she has on.
Isn't
My
that
goodness,
something?
the thought of washing and ironing that makes me humbled.
And
Tremble.
yeah, I'm shaking.
No, I meant the thought of ironing that dress would just, you'd have to put that on the wood stove, the old flat
Yeah.
iron.
And Andrew Jackson was the son of Henry
Crow.
Zumwalt.
Okay.
There's a grandson is of Henry Zumwalt, who was the son of the first marriage of Andrew Zumwalt.
Okay.
She was the granddaughter of the second marriage.
Okay.
So they had the same great-grandfather, different great-grandmothers.
I think that happened real often with these
Yes.
pioneer families. One wife would pass away, and then you'd meet.
Married a brother or a sister. Mhm.
And the Crow family also came to America about the same time in the 1700s. And they went to Kentucky and then to Missouri, and they all lived in that same little area. And then about 1847, Andrew Jackson and Christina moved on up to Illinois.
Well, they've made a lot of stops on their way out west. I mean,
Yes.
they kind of zigs and zagged.
But then in 1852, they headed for Oregon, and Dorothy's going to tell you that
Go
story.
for it, Dorothy. I'm anxious to get you out west.
Well, Andrew Jackson Crow and his wife, Christina Zumwalt Crow, put together a wagon train, and it consisted of 3 families, and they were all related. Andrew and Christina and their 9 children. Their oldest daughter was married, and her name was Eliane McCoy, and her husband James, and small son. Christina's youngest child was 1 year old. Her daughter's youngest child was 1 year old. And the third family was Zumwalts, and they were Isaac Zumwalt and his wife Jane, and
Now, that's the same, you're
Yeah.
telling me about these same people.
yes,
Okay.
yes, they're crossing the prairie now. They're getting ready to cross, and they had the Zumwalts had 2 children, and the youngest was 2, and they had another child on the train coming over.
Ouch.
Yes, yes.
Born on the road.
Yes,
huh?
and they had 3 hired hands. So there was 9 adults and 12 children, and that was 21 people. They had 4 wagons, oxen to pull the wagons, horses and cattle, and
These sound
cows.
like rich people to me.
well, they
Farmers.
had to live. They were farmers, but they had to exist out there in the prairie where there was nothing. They started from Martinsburg, Illinois, on April the 8th, 1852. A month later, in May, they arrived at the Missouri River. And when they got there, there was a lot of wagons, there was a lot of people, there was a lot of horses and animals. And they had to wait 2 days to get across the Missouri. And they put the wagons on the ferry. They made the horses and cattle swim. And those that wouldn't swim, they tied up to a boat and towed across.
Oh my. You get stubborn folks, we'll just put you on a rope.
And they called that a bull boat. I don't know why they called it a bull boat. But one of their oxen died at that time. They camped for a little while at that time, and they had 3 more wagons join the train, and 2 of the wagons belonged to Andrew's brother, Thompson Crow, and his wife Jane, and an 18-month-old child. Now, the last
Think of
wagon,
these diapers, folks.
all these young kids, it was like having a school, and you're taking the whole school across these, and it took 6 months to come across.
Oh, I'm thinking of those little babies. Fortunately, mothers could nurse them, but my
Yeah.
goodness, what did you do for diapers?
I don't know, maybe they washed a lot of them. And the third wagon, the last wagon of this new group, was 4 men. And these 4 men, there were actually 14 men in the group, and they carried their guns, and they were there to protect the train and to get food, animals,
sure,
yeah,
fish and
sugar, get food and fish and whatever for the train.
You know
Sometimes-
so much about your family's coming. Did they write a diary or?
We have a lot of people that are very interested in the family, and we hear from this person and they have their version of it, and we hear from another person, they have their version of it. The train started out, so that was 7 wagons altogether, but wagons joined their train and then they left the train. Sometimes they wanted to go a different route, or they had sickness and they had to stay over longer, and then they joined other trains. At one time there was 13 wagons, and with all the different animals and all the different people, that was a big train.
Oh, absolutely. You couldn't even, I mean, you'd need a bus nowadays to cross the country, that many.
Okay, in May, we'll go up to May now. May, they left the camp and headed south again. Headed west again. Traveling was hard. The road was not very good. It was either muddy and swampy, or it was sand dunes, and they had to pull through the sand dunes. It was in the heat of the summer. They couldn't find good drinking water very often, and it was miserable. And tempers flared, and arguments and fighting started. Sometimes fierce and sometimes funny.
Oh, I'm so glad you have all this insight into crossing.
Yeah. At Looking Glass Creek, isn't that a nice name, Looking? That's on the Platte River. They caught a lot of fish.
We're now into Nebraska.
Is that Nebraska? No, Platte. It might be.
I mean, nowadays, it was
Yeah.
just out west,
Yes.
okay? What did they do there?
They cooked these fish for breakfast, and Christina put on her plate the biggest fish of all, and it was about 1 foot long. And there was some humorous remarks from her husband. And she took it as an insult, and she threw the plate and the fish and a lot of angry words at him. And
Divorce over breakfast.
over breakfast. And Andrew apologized, but it didn't do any good. And she wouldn't get back on the train for 3 days. She walked. And she said,
I'll show him.
yes, that was what it was. She said she wanted to kill herself by exposure, or maybe by the Indians.
Okay. And neither one worked? And
No, she was still there. And just 1 week there was
I want to know who ate that fish. I didn't know.
Yeah. In 1 week they had 5 shouting quarrels among the men and 2 or 3 fist fights. Andrew Crow assailed George Dobbins. He was one of the hired men. And Dobbins retaliated and used the handle of the whip, the ox whip, to defend himself.
Oh my. Oh my.
Oh yeah, serious quarrels
I'd
we're talking
call in
about.
the cops, I'll tell you.
Well, they wouldn't have done much good out there. William Taylor and Thompson Crow got into a fist fight. Taylor beat him quite badly. He knocked him down 5 times. And
Stupid guy to keep popping up when you...
Thompson Crow spent the next 3 days in his recuperating, riding in his in his wagon.
At sick bed, I think that
Sick
was
bed, yes.
black and blue. Oh dear.
They
I'm
were
so glad they kept records like this, because otherwise, if you see it on the movies, they look like, you know.
They had all their cute little hats on and their dresses, and they walked around along so nice and stately. But they were out there. They were bored. They hurt. Muscles were sore.
Well, yeah, the other people, they always danced and sang. And
yes.
These guys fight.
Yes.
Oh,
They were all prepared to fight, defend themselves going across the prairie, and they met nobody they had to fight with.
so they
They had a
to fight with-
peaceful trip across, but they fought each other. It let off the tension. It was.
Oh,
By July now, they were in Oregon Territory, and going through the dreaded 40-mile desert between Big Sandy and the Green River. They thought that was the worst place during all the trip. That was the one they complained about, was that little bit. They couldn't find firewood to start a fire. They couldn't find water. The horses and everybody suffered. But by August, they had reached the old 3-island crossing on the Snake River. Now, this is Idaho. I recognize where that was.
right.
But it wasn't Idaho then. It was, and after crossing the Snake River and camping, they had an outbreak of cholera on the thing, and many of them were sick. And Christina Crow and 2 of her daughters,
Thompson.
2 of her daughters, Elizabeth, 17, and Lucinda, 7, were victims. They passed.
They died.
They died. And also Thompson Crow and his little child, the little girl about 1.5 years. And they buried him in the tracks of the wagons, in the road, the tracks of the wagons, so that their graves were hidden and wouldn't be found as very well. And
so that is so interesting, because if you, the tracks are still there in some places.
yes. Mm-hmm.
And that's where they
Buried their
buried
Yeah.
loved
yeah.
ones.
Yes. Christina Crow was a very, very talented lady. She was a master musician and played the piano.
Now, who's the artist that you inherited the talent
I don't know.
from? She's got gorgeous pictures.
And
Yes.
it said that she could speak 7 languages. You would.
And from someone who had no education, so they didn't.
Well, who says she didn't have an education?
No, I'm thinking back to the great grandma
Uh-huh.
on the other side
Yeah.
who couldn't see that it was a document.
Oh.
She put it in her bonnet
Yeah.
instead. To this woman with 7 languages, I'm impressed.
She must have been educated to be able to speak
Yes.
that. Andrew Crow was also very sick at that time. He had the cholera too. And it was, at that time, it was the belief that you didn't give cold water to people with a high fever.
Oh.
It wasn't good for the body. So they wouldn't let him have cold water. And secretly, he persuaded his son Billy, age 13, to go out and get him some water, some nice cold drinking water. And he said, if I'm going to die of cholera, I'm not going to die thirsty. He recovered and had a long life. I think he was 90 when he died, passed away.
Tough old birds,
Yes.
as they say. Huh?
September, they reached Lane County in Oregon, and he got some land at that time, and where he settled in is now called the city of Crow. It's Crow City.
Well, there's a Crow City, Oregon.
Yeah, there's a Crow City.
Well, now, who's going to take us on into Southern Oregon?
I'm going to.
Yes.
Okay, go for it.
The youngest daughter of Andrew Jackson and Christina was Rosanna Amanda. And she was the one that was about a year old.
She was a
year and a half. And she grew up in the little town of Crow, which is located south of the Fern Ridge Reservoir, just west of Eugene.
Right. Beautiful country.
Yes. And she married Thomas Jefferson Hussey. Thomas Jefferson. We're related. Andrew Jackson, Thomas Jefferson.
They just didn't happen to be the two presidents.
No.
They were named for them, I'm sure.
Yes. And he crossed the Oregon Trail in 1854. Rosanna was 16 when she married.
Oh,
and
my.
Thomas Jefferson was 31. And they were married.
Older man.
Well, they often was that way. In 1867. And they had 5 or 6 children there in Lane County. And then they loaded all their possessions on a train, and they came south as far as Riddle. Riddle's just right over the hill from Canyonville.
Right. And that was home for them?
No, they got in wagons and came over the mountains to Southern Oregon, to Josephine County.
Now, so the train only went as far as Riddle, huh?
It hadn't gotten the rest of the way at that time.
Oh my, they really are pioneers.
Yes. And they found a patch of land near the Rogue River on what's now called Ferry Road.
Now, is this a picture of the Ferry Road house?
Mm-hmm. No, this one is this is Rosanna and Andrew Jackson. Rosanna Amanda Crow.
There they are, folks, and he's Thomas Jefferson Crow. And there's Crow.
Thomas Jefferson Hussey.
Oh,
yeah.
Hussey.
Okay. So
Yes.
the Crow.
And this is the house they built on Ferry Road.
Now, is this house still existing?
No, not that one.
Did you ever go there?
Yes.
Yes, we remember it because we grew up on that.
Oh my!
Their
It's
land.
so kind of stubby this way. Who's this?
That's our grandmother, Nellie Ellen Hussey.
Oh my goodness! I can see more pictures here, and how can we talk about each one of them? We have so few minutes left.
We only have a couple. This is Nellie Ellen and her husband.
And then how did they
Archer
get to this?
Clayton Ford.
What about this great big house? Where in the world is that?
That's on Ferry Road. That's the house he built for his family.
Wow, now that's first class. Were you in this house too?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
But you don't live out, now Fort Ferry, it's called
It's called,
Upper Ferry?
Upper Ferry Road.
yes.
Which Wildlife Images is just a stone's throw from
Oh, yes.
Ferry Road, isn't it?
Yes.
Who's that? Is that the same big house?
That's the same house. That's the other side of it.
And there they are.
There's the family. And that's,
Which one's mom?
that
This is
was
our
our grandparents.
Oh,
And this is her grandfather, Archer Clayton Ford, Nellie Ellen Hussey Ford, and their 7 children.
Oh my. I
Dad
love
was
this
the
little-
oldest.
I love this little costume he's
Oh
wearing.
yes, that's
And this
Clayton.
is your mom and dad?
That's their parents.
Oh my. Isn't
So we
she
got 'em right here to
beautiful- Beautiful woman. But there's a funniest picture over here,
Oh.
and who's that?
That's Christina's mother, Susanna
Coons.
Kuntz.
Coons, yeah.
Christina,
You wouldn't want to cross mom, would you?
and this was the little cabin she grew up in back in Missouri. And she also came to Oregon, but she came a year later.
This is fantastic. Thank you for digging through your family archives for us, and thank you for coming out west. You've stayed. Your brother, you mentioned,
He's still living on the home place on Ferry Road.
and you have another brother that was.
It's in Florida.
We still have a brother in Florida.
What about the crash of the car on the day of the flood? Who was that?
Oh, that was our brother. He was 31 or 32, and we had one of our big floods, and he was on
Riverbanks Road?
Riverbanks Road, and
Hit a soft spot?
he swerved for a deer
And,
right by the Fry Farms.
and his name?
Ralph Ford.
Ralph Ford, a class in 1950, my
Right, yes.
husband Doug
Yes.
on the camera just mentioned.
Yes.
Oh, well, tragedies happen to so many of us, but I'm so glad you ladies came today to share your story of the Fords and the Ford and coming across the prairies. Thank you for being my guest, and
Thank you.
we'll see you on the history books. Your local history society would appreciate you folk writing the story just like the Fords have and sharing it with the Society for Posterity. Thanks again for tuning in.